And we're live. And I have this little counter up in the top left corner of my screen. So I'm Terry McGill, and this is Who's Your Neighbor? This show originated after I really saw too many Facebook stories and posts about what was going on in people's lives because of the lack of connection, the lack of inclusion, and in some cases, the seclusion that you don't want when the person you share your apartment with or home with is not gentle and supportive. I hope I said that really gently. So people were experiencing, and still are, and now we've got Omicron, and we don't know how that's going to play out. So along the way, a friend of mine made a suggestion, Portia Ing Johnson. You may know Portia. And she says, well, do a Who's Your Neighbor show. And so what I'm doing is what we as a team are doing, because it takes a village. We're exploring and presenting to you your neighbors, mostly the Portland, Oregon metropolitan area. Although the farthest we've gone from my home is 15 miles. So who are your neighbors? Who are the people who really make a difference and nobody's heard about them? They may have a close circle of 50 of their tribe at the most, and they're spread all over the world. So tonight, I want to introduce you, and we'll bring her on right now. I want you to meet Edie Summers.
Hi,
this
Terry.
Is a woman. Thank you, Edie.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so happy that Portia introduced us by electronics, because you and I are in Portland and she's in Hawaii right now. So
Portia.
we will eat. Pardon?
I miss Portia.
She will be back.
Good.
She's not sure exactly when, but she will. So Edie, thumbnail sketch. What happened to you when you were 22 that trashed your life?
Well, now I look at it as a gift. So I was in a ski accident and I broke my knee and I had to have surgery. And I had a really good energy before that, really great health. And then it just changed everything. I really developed a new normal. I developed chronic fatigue after that. And I think I learned a little bit that maybe you dealt with that as well. And I think a lot of people have dealt with fatigue now, COVID fatigue. And yeah, so very early on in my life, my health changed and I did develop a new normal. I learned a lot of techniques and I did really well for a long time. I do pretty well unless I have a lot of stress. And then my symptoms start to flare up, and my symptoms are primarily chronic fatigue or brain fog, things like that. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, unfortunately, at this point.
And so for our viewers who aren't familiar with chronic fatigue syndrome, say that 3 times fast, or CFS, brain fog, no energy. I went through one period in my life, and when I told the doctor my symptoms, he says, well, it sounds like chronic fatigue syndrome. And I said, no, only women get that. No, not true.
Yeah. And anyone can get it. Anyone.
And so what you've done is you've gone on, you just didn't give up. In fact,
no.
What's the name of your book?
So my book is called The Memory of Health. And I actually, so the main thing that helped me, there are many things that work, and I know that some things have helped you as well, but I set an intention to feel better. That's, I think, the most important thing. And then that sort of sets off a cascade of action that you take. And there are a lot of things that can help for sure. And CFS is unrefreshing sleep, and but people can develop chronic fatigue as a symptom, and some people have CFS or chronic fatigue syndrome. Other people have other reasons that they might have chronic fatigue. Could be a brain injury, could be fibromyalgia, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, having cancer treatments, multiple sclerosis, the list goes on and on. Even COVID, long hauler COVID. People who have had COVID and are long haulers have had it. And I think I've experienced some of it as well. So, because it involves, most likely it involves the immune system. I'm not a doctor and I don't claim to be, but in a lot of the research I did in my book is, there's the immune system and nervous system are deeply connected. So they kind of work off each other. So I may have gone off topic there.
Michelle will bring up a picture for us, The Memory of Health, A Journey to Well-Being by Edie Summers. And so you can think of the best several summers of your life. That's her last name. And the book itself, I've heard it described as a meditation, as well as, I forget how they described it. It was so beautifully written, though.
Probably Portia wrote that review. I'm guessing. Yeah, and I want, it's a universal story. I had different subtitles, like kind of going through chronic fatigue, chronic illness and back, and then I changed it to my journey to well-being, and then I realized my journey is different than everybody else's. I mean, we all have a unique path, that we take to healing and well-being, and it's different for everybody. So it's kind of universal story, really, hopefully.
So how many years were you searching to this point?
Oh, I mean, honestly, it's ongoing, but it was very intense in the beginning. I would say I had several bouts of it. So in the very beginning, I went to see a naturopath because I was in physical therapy and I started to hit a wall in terms of getting my knee better. And that going to the naturopath, I went to see him because I was having trouble with, I was on ibuprofen to get swelling down and different painkillers. And that was my introduction to the natural health world. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big believer in integrative health. So I like both modern medicine and alternative health. But so I was seeking early on, and I stayed in the natural foods industry for 7 years. And for me, it was ongoing. But then in grad school, I came across a lot of research about resilience and mindfulness. So I'm a seeker, and I think a lot of us are. And a lot of people that develop chronic conditions are seeking always looking for ways to feel better. So to answer your question, Terry, it's like it's ongoing. I think we always want to feel as good as we can. Right. So I think it's
actually one of the things that I really appreciate about you is you are a seeker. You haven't given up. I work with a lot of people. They believe that they've hit the ceiling, and they don't believe that they have any power, that they take whoever they've talked with, met with, worked with as gospel, and they give up. They've told me, well, my doctor said this is as good as it gets. In fact, one of our local people here, one of the people here in Portland, I'll get it said that way, she had congestive heart failure.
Oh, wow.
She had 2 different nurse practitioners tell her that, oh, but it doesn't get better. You'll deteriorate until you die.
Wow, that's a hard thing to hear. And I'm very sorry that they heard that. And, we have to, so a lot of people that have chronic conditions or whatever they're diagnosed with, we might see a lot of different practitioners, and I love practitioners. Everybody's going to have their different opinions, and a lot of times you have to piece together what's going to work for you and also be your own health detective. And yeah, I think it's really important to never give up. And gosh, I really do believe that our bodies and our hearts and our souls are very resilient, much more so than we give ourselves credit for. And we can transform and we can keep evolving. So I don't know what that person, everybody has a different story and different situation, and it must be hard to
Well,
hear something like that.
well, here's a neat thing. She's a rebel,
Okay, good. That'll take her
and
far.
and that's a positive thing.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and
You look
so
what you in life.
the neat thing, the end of the story about her, for a quick overall year and a half wind up, her doctor said, "I can't treat you anymore.
Mm.
You don't
Mm.
have any symptoms of congestive heart failure anymore."
Gosh, wow. Oh,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
it
I'm so
is.
glad to hear that. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm going to do the paperwork to get her into a medical study with Dr. Peter Hudoba, who's been doing research with Dr. and Master Jigong Shah, a medical doctor, traditional Chinese medicine doctor. He ran a hospital in the Philippines, administrator for like 7 years.
Wow.
But his earlier background was meditation and the traditional Chinese arts that I used to think of as martial arts.
Mhm.
Tai Chi or Tai Chi, depending on how you want to pronounce it. He says Tai Chi. He's from China. I'll take Tai Chi. Um, but Qigong
Mm.
and
I love
other,
that.
actually 7 different of the historical traditional Chinese arts. And he studied with people that you and I could never even get an audience with.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, Dr. Hudoba has done research for 20 years.
Mm.
And so he's got stories about when people use these techniques that Dr. and Master Shaw brought to the Western world.
Mhm.
Um, not everybody heals, but there are miraculous cures. I've never heard, and I'm not a medical person, so I'm not anybody to check with, but others that are knowledgeable say, no, you can't heal from congestive heart failure.
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with permanent brain damage, 15% in the memory and short-term learning areas.
Oh,
That
wow.
has changed. Um, and
You
I
got
remember I was speaking with Dr. Master Shaw one day,
better.
and I said, my memory is not really healing that much. He said, weren't you diagnosed with permanent brain damage? And I'm going, oops, it's not permanent. And part of it is medical science has learned so much over since 1975 when I had the big accident is what I call it.
Mhm.
Um, so with you though, going back to the symptoms of chronic fatigue, regardless of what the causes are, whether
Mhm.
it's diagnosed as symptom or MS or whatever it is,
Yes.
what can you offer to our viewers and listeners? Um, could we start
Yeah.
with be a rebel?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And believe in your, like, you have to kind of, so again, setting intention to feel better, I found to be the most powerful thing, because that it makes your subconscious take action. And then, yeah, believing that you have, that your body's on your side. I would say that, what on a practical level, the biggest thing that helps me is self-care. So, and you learned this about me last night when you and I were talking. I need a lot of downtime. Like the more stress I have in my life, like I'm working full time right now. I work with autistic kids. I have a really long commute. I need a lot of downtime to stay in balance. And that's self-care. So on a practical level, self-care, and that's an umbrella term. There are, stress management is part of self-care. Stress management is going to help you with your nervous system. Anything that's going to help your nervous system kind of dial it down. And I suspect, I wonder if Qigong, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, helps with that. I love that as well. I love that it kind of works with your energy and
What is that?
qigong or qigong. I love that. That always gives me more energy, and I wonder if it helps your nervous system too, because anything that's going to help your nervous system calm down and get more in the relaxation response versus the stress response. I think a lot of us now are stuck in a chronic stress response. It doesn't have to be from, chronic fatigue or trauma. It's just from the way that the world is right now, so I would say that those are some of the biggest things that have helped me, is practicing a lot of self-care and really listening to my body and my nervous system. And what is my body saying to me? What does it need in the moment to feel better? And then taking action on that. Because your body is really speaking to you through your symptoms. That's what I've learned.
So when you say self-care,
Yes.
I hear you saying that you need downtime. What about diet?
Yeah, I'm pretty careful about diet. I've gotten the stronger your body gets, like the stronger your digestive system gets. I mean, everybody's different with what they tolerate and don't. But I heard I heard a naturopath say that, we want to be careful of irritants, because if you're consuming something that's irritating your body, that can influence your immune system and potentially set up chronic fatigue or other symptoms. So I learned, and that was one of the things I had to adjust over the years, is really paying attention to what's irritating my.
So, Edie,
I
your
stay away from
bandwidth
refined
is
sugar.
fading in and out,
I'll
just
eat
so
like
you'll know.
carbonated juice.
So, your screen has frozen right now. I don't know if you can hear me. And I'm hardwired, so I had to deal with that too. So I suspect that you're still frozen. I know you are on my screen. So until I can see your image moving again, I'll just fill in on a couple of things that Edie noted. Number one, the book has, because I ordered a copy. I like to know, excuse me. That's not COVID. That's my allergies. So two things. One is the amount of stress we have in our life. I was completely amazed when I began to do my own web research, which really isn't research. I learned to sort out the real researchers and read their stuff. So stress, according to the Mayo Clinic, the Johns Hopkins Clinic, and Stanford University, the medical school, I was amazed. 80% of all illness is either formed by, kept alive, or increased by stress. I was completely amazed. The more research I did, I found out that there are companies, the larger the company is, the more likely in their HR department, human resources department, they will have trainers who go around to the different offices and train people how to reduce their stress. And what was it? 20, 30 years ago, I began to hear about 30 years ago, I began to hear about mindfulness training. And so, I've been meditating since 1976, I believe. I didn't know how to meditate back then, and I've gotten a lot better at it. But my blood pressure, I go in for a checkup, and the doctors say, hey, is your blood pressure always this low? I said, oh, yeah. People question me every time they do a blood test, the professionals, doctors and nurses. They had me wear a pacemaker, not a pacemaker, a gizmo. That's an electronic, that's a technical term for an electronic device that measures your heart. It's called a gizmo. And they found nothing wrong with me. 6 months of tests. I got so tired of tests. Not only stress, though, but what we put into our body affects our body. And it will increase. Sorry for the hesitation. I'm looking down below at my screen to see if we got Edie back, but she hasn't jumped back on yet. Sometimes we lose a guest, not very often, but I hope she'll be able to come back on. So until then, What I'd like to do is bring you someone who has the ability to absolutely reduce your stress level. James Dawson, I've known him since 7, 8 years ago. He's a guitarist. He used to do covers for the biggest bands, and I was hearing that he was like he's been around the world 5 times. So, and he's had some physical issues, and he's coming back out of semi-retirement, I hope. And there he is, James.
Hello.
Would you share one of your compositions to reduce stress with us?
Sure.
Thank you. So Michelle will drop me off, and we'll just listen to you and mellow out.
Okay, I'm going to drop the camera down a little bit so you can watch my fingers instead of just me. All right, and here we go.
James, thank you very much. So I was able to connect with Edie, and she did she came back on for a little bit, but her internet dropped off. So whatever the reason is, thank you so much. That was an original composition, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you were telling me the other day that music is starting to come through you without you consciously. Is that a fair way to say it? Really knowing what you're doing.
Kind of being in the flow. Sometimes I'll play a piece and I won't even remember where I played.
That's an interesting condition. I was watching Yo-Yo Ma. He was here in Portland, and my wife and I went to this place downtown. And at one point, I shouldn't have done it. I didn't think about it. I just went out loud. I went, he's meditating. He had his eyes closed, and he was completely immersed in the music. He was, he knew what he was playing, so he had that in consciousness. But what I'm hearing lately from musicians is that when you say, you don't remember what you played, that's a condition that in Sanskrit, I just had the term come up and dropped it. Anyway, it's a deep meditation. Samadhi. There's 7 levels of samadhi, and you can evidently go into the lower levels playing music and have no idea what you played when you come back out of it. And yet, worth recording the music. And the good news is this is recorded. So for you, if you want to check out and see what you did, and for our viewers, if you liked it, come back and do it again and leave a comment, because we would like to bring James out into the public and back out into the public, I should say. And of course, that's totally up to you. And I just want you to know you've got an audience around the world. Again, a different audience. Yeah. And it looks like Edie is back on. So James, thank you very much. We'll stay in touch. Keep those calls coming in. I like to stay in touch with you. And if Michelle will bring Edie back on, we'll see. Hello and welcome back.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Everything froze, and I don't know.
It's a condition that we've discovered because I've been doing not just Zoom, but live stream and StreamYard. And sometimes the internet service provider the bandwidth will just collapse in a certain area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think something definitely happened.
Right, because you froze here, and then you just dropped clear off, and then you came back on and dropped off again. Yeah. But that was history. Let me ask you just a couple of questions.
Okay.
Do you counsel, assist, coach individuals anymore?
I have, and at the moment I'm working full time, so it's harder for me to do that. However, I have free groups online. So I have a private group called Chronic Fatigue Coach on Facebook, and it's free. And there are actually several of us in there who kind of assume the coaching role. And in the future, I will work with individuals again. It's harder for me to do it right now. And then I have a page on Facebook called Chronic Fatigue Support, and there are tons of people in there. So I'll do like free coaching on there, just, tips and.
Right. And everyone, Michelle, if you would bring the book cover, the picture back up. I love how it just goes right in the middle and doesn't cover either one of our faces. Well, very much anyway. Let's see. I'll move over there. So the memory of health, a journey to well-being. And I loved how you phrased it. It was, this is not about my journey. It's everybody's journey.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted it to be a universal story because it is a universal story. And we all have our own journeys. And unfortunately, most of us will face a health challenge at some point in our lives. And Terry, I just want to bring up, you and I were talking about how people were, seeking peace, wanting to maybe seek more peace and connection in this time. And I think that's really important. And, I think that we're on a collective journey now. I can really feel it. We've been through a collective trauma. We're still going through it. And, how can we sort of peel away the layers and maybe really sink deeper into the present moment? Because sometimes that's all we really have, and kind of open our hearts more and really seek that connection, because we're social beings. And I think that's going to help us get through this more, like seeking that connection more and living from the heart.
Speaking to what you said about being in the present, some of the higher level spiritual teachers have taught that literally over millennium. Who was it? He was psychologist, Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, the psychologist with a sailboat and a motorcycle and a sports car. And then he went to India and he met a real guru and transformed. And he wrote a book, Be Here Now, in the present. And I've because I've been doing a lot of reading over the years to try to understand from different perspectives, how to fix myself. And what I keep hearing is, and the first time I heard it, I thought it was presents, presence. Like,
I like that too.
Well, but the if you spell it differently, the presence of whatever it is that's undefinable, whether you call it collective consciousness or cosmic consciousness, universal mind, or universal heart, or God, or Yahweh, Allah, the Tao. It's being present.
Yeah.
Because if we're not, in fact, one of the interesting thing is I was reading, here's a traditional Chinese medicine doctor who's also internationally known now teacher and teaches health, and meditation's only a part of it. And he said, if you're thinking about the future a lot, the future, we're damaging our liver. If we're in the past, we're damaging our spleen.
Interesting.
Like, whoa, interesting.
Well, I could see how maybe anxiety about the future is like stress, I think, can affect the liver, and along with anger, but it's just like that kind of spike in cortisol, I think. And then also, you were mentioning that, I think Portia had mentioned this, like, kind of talking about hope. And I think that is connected to being more present, because a lot of us do have anxiety about what's going to happen in the future. And we've been forced to slow down, and, and where can we find hope when sometimes all we really have is this moment, whereas really the moment is magical, and you can sink deeper and deeper into the present moment. I think that's where all the real gifts are. And then seeking more and more to connect with one another, because again, we're all in the same boat here, and this may be all we have right now. We have the internet when it's working, and then hopefully we can meet in person when we can as well, safely. And, but what can we do, like, to give ourselves hope in the new year? Even if it doesn't feel like much, it can be everything. Like, with what we have right now, what can we do? We can seek to connect more with ourselves, other people, do what we can to make a difference and take care of ourselves, take care of one another. We can do all of this.
There are more Facebook shows now. Some of them, to me, I went, well, it's about animals. But people are looking at the animals. Why are more people adopting pets the last 2 years? Because they want companionship.
Yeah.
And somebody said once, spell dog backwards. G-O-D.
That's probably the same.
So
I believe it.
What's behind it is acceptance. I remember I was afraid of pit bulls until I learned about pit bulls, and it's the owner, it's not the breed. And pit bull is not a breed. Pit bull is like 40 different kinds of combinations of different dogs.
Really?
But
I didn't know that.
I didn't either until I started reading some of this thread, and it was like, my gosh, so much I didn't know about. But what they pointed out was that even the pit bulls that have been bred to fight, they weren't bred, they were trained. And they can be untrained. And you have to be careful because they have PTSD too.
Oh, so, I bet they do.
So they can snap.
So they're trained.
So you have to be really careful.
I see them as being really loving. Any pit bull I've seen online, they just seem so happy and loving, and they're like, they just want to snuggle. And
when they're raised, and it's really interesting the difference in breeds of dogs and how they relate to people.
Yeah.
For example, you don't want, there's some kind of a terrier, not Jack Daniels, that's the drink, the whiskey. Jack Russell, that's what it is. No. Jack Russell Terrier. I guess a Jack Daniels territory would be very laid back.
How about a Jack Daniels Terrier? No, I'm kidding. I don't know what that, I don't even know what I'm saying.
So we're running down to the end of our time.
Okay.
I really want to thank you for dealing with losing your bandwidth and coming back twice.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Would you give me the 3 words of your Facebook page again, slowly, so our listeners can get it?
Oh, sure. Like where we do like free coaching.
The Facebook something or other?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So there's Chronic Fatigue Coach. There's a group on there called
Chronic Fatigue. What was the third word?
Coach.
Coach.
It's a private group.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty easy to find. And then there's a page called Chronic Fatigue Support.
Okay. So the page anybody can go to. If somebody wanted to get into the private group, how would they do that?
Same thing, to just request it. It's free to join, and we all kind of help one another. And I do try to, do some coaching as well. And
so that's Chronic Fatigue Coach, and that's a Facebook group.
As a Facebook, it's private, so that you people can feel comfortable to talk about whatever they need to. Yeah.
Yes, but they can request to join. Yeah.
I think it's probably pretty easy to find on there.
Well, I know that Facebook has that window where you can search, and so if they put in, they go to Facebook and put in Chronic Fatigue Coach, it's going to come up. And the other one was
just Chronic Fatigue Support. It's a
support.
Facebook page.
Thank you.
And there are tons of people in both of them, and lots of help from a lot of people.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
So Edie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry. I
we're putting your book into the chat, so it'll be there, because these are archived, and it amazes me. There may not be, but 2 or 3 people on at any one evening, and then I look 10 days later, and there's been 130 views.
That's
It's like,
awesome.
wow.
That's great. Well, we can build a virtual community and we'll just keep connecting. And yeah, and just, I would just say, hold on to hope, you know, and like kind of see what you can do to create that hope for yourself and others. You know, it is a new year. So, you know, we can set the intention we're going to set the intention to have a great year, regardless of what happens in the outside world.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Terry.
And let's stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So I do want to offer one other bit of hope. There is something called Dow Healing Hands. It's a transmission that some people said, well, you know, it's similar to pranic healing or Reiki. And I'd never heard of pranic healing. And I'd only heard of one kind of Reiki, and evidently there's 6 or 7 or 8 now. Different flavors, not meaning to be dismissive, but different frequencies of it. So Michelle will post the, and I call it the MailChimp link. And this is where, for free, you can get a 10-minute sample of a Dow Healing Hands healing. You can ask for any specific thing you desire. So it can be chronic fatigue. It can be finances. It can be relationships. It can be intelligence. Getting admitted. Yeah, I had one client says, I want my daughter to be admitted to this college. Like, well, I don't do it, but you know, we can definitely offer. I like to call them blessings. And it's not so much energy. It is, but it's very high frequency energy. It's at the light level, above visible light. And so that goes into, well, how do you know? So I invite you to experience it. Free, 10 minutes. Can't hurt you. And you might want to have more than one. And there's some stories on that page that you'll go to also. So that's a gift for you of Dow Hands blessing, to give you an experience that you may not have had. And until next week, I'm Terry McGill. And who's your neighbor?